Thank you, guys. It's been a good morning so far. We far behind my schedule given me, which is really good. Thank you, Nicole. But it is time to move on to page 75 of the agenda, which is the risk update. So let's just see where we're going with that. Donna, I think your name's against this one, please.
So that's my name's against
Against the
So, I'll take the report as read. There's two emerging risks that have become recent since the last time. One is the risk on the Rewarded Reform Programme. Obviously there's lots of risks with that. We've just identified some significant risks here, which is like disruption to council business operations, changes that will occur as operations transfer to a new entity, consumer risk for water users, there could be affordability and cost hikes for consumers, and there's a political risk that we as a council may have very little influence over the process and outcome. So we put that on the register just to identify that this is happening, and we need to keep it abreast of what's going on, and the way that we mitigate this will be just by staying informed, engaging, and basically being involved. And I think the letter to DIA is a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, I'm not going to replay it, but I'm very keen that we do make that connection. But it's actually our concerns will be common. Essentially, to find out what should be done. Are there any?
Sorry. The second one is around liquefaction, and that has been legislated by government that they've given territorial authorities a 2-year transition to be able to map out areas for liquefaction. So we put that on the register just to say the risk is that if we were unable to map it within the set time frame, but we believe that we are able to do that. Then we've got people looking at that right now. And I guess there are some other things that we're looking at. There's going to be a cost, to council for this, which something that I think doesn't get thought about when government legislates some of those things. And I don't know what that cost is yet, but so that's on our risk register in relation to that. Bruce, you might have some more information.
Yes, so through the chair, I haven't really got too much more information. You don't have a cost estimate at the stage that I've seen. There's something that I'm keen to see from the team. It shouldn't be too hard to get it done through our geological maps, our GIS data, and all this detailed work. So it should be fairly straightforward, but we do need to get a handle on those costs and get those back to the committee so we are aware of the situation. So,
Is the actual, the liquefaction is almost a risk right around the country. Are we particularly susceptible, say, compared to Christchurch or anything like that, or are we that's more the ourselves?
Yeah, we don't believe so. It's predominantly where you've got those through the towns. Deposits over a long time. They're very fluid. So there'll be a few areas that would be susceptible to it.
Probably most of the townships and stuff as well, but yeah. So yes, they're probably useful. Thank you for that. Thank you, Donna. Is there questions folk would like to raise? You've got a couple, but I've already asked some questions, so folk around the table. No. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the Three Waters reform and that the fourth point there about political risk as council. We have very little influence over the process and outcome, and I guess what you're saying around communication will be key, and slightly worrying that someone may turn up at the front desk and say, "Oh, I've got an issue with water," and we just throw our hands up in the air and say, "Oh, well, nothing to do with us anymore." So I guess people are going to have to get their heads around how that's managed and communicated.
I think it's just we just have to go along work alongside with what's happening and with the government to make sure that we are as involved as possible.
Yes, whether we act as a conduit for
Yep.
people's.
Maybe the option, yeah, we don't know yet what it's going to look like, what the entity will look like.
Yeah, I think we say we wouldn't be alone in that.
No, indeed.
It's going to be a similar situation for majority of local government. TCDC, so there'll be a lot of public involvement at that stage.
Yeah.
But this part is that thing where we don't have the clarity to know what it's going to look like, so that creates some risk and anxiety around it. So yeah, once we know more, we'll
Just
feel
ring-
comfortable, but
Just ring 0800 Three Waters.
The roadshow indicated that post the election, which is always interesting, post the general election, is when the so-called conceptual design of these multi-regional water companies will really kick in.
Yeah.
The diagrams, if that's when it starts, I don't think we should be naive enough to think that there isn't a lot of thought about how these water companies will operate. But clearly the engagement with councils in terms of what those companies look like, what it would mean for us, actually, we still the choice, do we want to opt in? I think it's really difficult for us to opt out, but do we want to opt in? Just to go through that whole process, and those sorts of things have to be ones that we are happy with, which is actually how the service maintained to our communities. In all the ways we talked about today. Rightio, I've got a couple of questions here for me. Bruce, this way, you haven't got out of the room. You can ask your question or two. Look, it could have been under the LKP stuff, but we all have a confidence bias that we can do things when we suddenly find that this LKP were doing things that actually committed ourselves to the previous LKP. It was the day yesterday with a council that we all agreed it's got to happen. At this stage, how's that CapEx program looking? And has it given you thoughts about what we should be trying to do in terms of this LKP?
So through the CapEx program, for the LTP is currently being finalised at the moment. So we've had all the teams pulling together the projects for that LTP, and we've got to go through a process with that. So the community boards have been engaged at different levels around those projects in different ways. And we're trying to pull together the master list of all the projects before we then have to go through that master list and split it out. So we're writing that at the moment. And I've got some more here approved at the moment, which are the forms with all the information about each project, which gives you the assumptions we've got up on things, all that kind of stuff. So it's a big job and we want to move through it. But where we're aiming for it is we're trying to, obviously we've got a lot of financial pressure on us, we've got the COVID situation, so we're trying to cut our cloth to suit. And so it's not going to be a massive LTP, a humongous capital program. We're trying to size it down to the right size for our organisation, for our district, and for our customers. So that's the kind of focus. So it's got the funnel, that's all wide at the top, all the projects all get added, and then they, as you go down, you have to get squeezed out. You get down to what really you have to look. That was a question.
No, it's helpful.
Can we do a little bit of quantum around that, Bruce, or not?
Not yet, no.
Because I understand broadly, am I correct in the ballpark, and I think it's broadly, this is where I understand it.
Yeah.
Broadly, we're coming off about 35 million capital spend to looking probably 22 or 23 over the next 3 years period.
Right, okay, so I'm following now. So we're aiming, this is not what
And I think we've got understanding.
we're aiming around like 28 million per year, so 280 across 2 years. There'll be ups and downs in different years as you have to deliver a lot of work like the different status projects. But we're aiming for the 28. It's actually going to be very challenging to do. Look at the asset base we've got and the renewals that we do, and also the food renewal on all the councils in New Zealand. We've had lots of stuff that should have been renewed earlier, and it hasn't. It's actually a very challenging number to get to the 28. So yeah, but we're working hard and putting information back to the members around how we got to that number, what isn't in that number, to make sure that the members are fully over the top of the recommended capital program for the LTP. But it's a challenge.
The issue I have around that is that we are trying to do what we have to do with no increase in cost to the ratepayer. So I just don't think we communicate. I would say if you're going to talk to the ratepayer, they do not understand this and we don't communicate it. So if we go and say, we're normally down about 40 million, that doesn't actually keep up what we have to do. We are one of local bodies across the country that is seriously underinvested in our infrastructure and core services. And it's because that we can't face the person to say, well, apart from the fact that the model's wrong, because that way we can pay for it through rates by and large, a few fees and charges, but more. So somehow we've got to say to people, if you want more things, if you want your coastal erosion fixed, if you want your water supply fixed, if you want all these things, we are very happy to deliver them. But it comes at a cost. So don't keep writing to the newspaper, don't keep going on social media, don't do any of that stuff, unless you are prepared to pay the price. And what it's starting to get to me is that we are constantly, well, just because people don't want to have an increase in their rates, we can't do it. So we'll sit here, won't worry me because I'll be long dead, but my kids won't. And one day they're going to wake up and they're going to need all these new systems, and there'll be no money. There'll be no government money, there'll be no rate, there'll be no nothing. So I think we've got to change the expectation in people's minds that whether you like it or not, rates have to go up if taken out current systems. In this district, by 10% per annum, just to keep up, because 10% isn't enough. If our rates went up 20% tomorrow, that isn't enough. And so I know they can try, all we do is say, well, shit, what would the bloody ratepayer be happy about accepting? They won't take 20%, or different than 10%. And they'll even happy with 5%. And so all you can do is treat water. And in the meantime, the staff time and everyone else's time is taken up trying to defend ourselves. And I'll talk about water in the men's report. To me, it then becomes a reputational risk. Because people think that we're ineffective and we're useless and we don't know what we're doing, and the staff have no idea, and the chief executive is really running on Mars, he doesn't know either. And that's what you read about every day in your life, if you follow this stuff on this, or that, or in the letters to the editor. So somehow, I just think we have to put a stake in the ground and say, what honestly do we need to provide the facilities and the service levels now and into the future, and put that in front of people. Now we can make a choice about what we don't want versus what we need. And our problem is we spend a lot of time on what we don't need and not much time on what we do need. And a lot of that's for self-preservation. I keep saying that's not my case. I believe we go out and but so that's the dilemma I see. We do things half-hearted simply to appease the squeaky wheel. And I just think we are on a slippery slope. Just every day I wake up and I think, God, what's going to be tomorrow?
So I think, Tony, we need to recognise that we are about to, figuratively speaking, go out the long-term plan. And some of the stuff that I've done, I remember an old colleague saying, about another month I would spend it thinking about my plan and communicating it.
Correct.
So what you are saying, or what you are saying, Tony, and I think I'd like to suggest that I take your point, but I think we need to shoot that on the back into that long-term plan process. Are we sending clearly the right signals to the community?
Well,
Because that is where it starts anyway, is what I'm trying to say.
Bruce, we can start that process, in my opinion, a lot of it, we can start that process now, so that when we go to the long-term, because people don't absorb it straight away.
No, I agree. Yeah. So fair point, and I think this becomes a key thing, is that this whole LTP process should be designed to help you have that conversation with the community.
Yeah.
I think, and more so now than ever, when the things that we talked about with that LTP plan but also recognising it's one of our core risks where you're saying 28 per annum would actually be a substantial challenge for the council. So I agree. So I think I'm taking on board. That's a good comment. I don't know whether there's more we can do right at this point, mitigating this as a risk, unless we recognise it's going to be shared into the whole LTP process. So that's communicating now essentially what we say inside that consultation document.
Yeah, so for me, in the long-term plan, I put the real number in. What do we honestly need to provide this service and put it in?
Yeah.
Now, the number's going to be horror story, but it's going to go to public consultation. Now, if they bark because the rates are going up 14% per annum in the next 10 years, then so it's okay. Now tell me what we don't want. Do you want water? Yes or no? Do you want roads? Yes or no? Do you want your rubbish picked up? Yes or no? What don't you want? Because the only way we'll get the community to engage and understand this is by putting the whole picture out there, not saying what do we think the community would accept in our long-term plan, which is how we do it.
Yes.
It's really, it's actually morally wrong, but
well, I'm wondering, Tony, I just conscious of time. I think that's the point that perhaps you and I are totally aligned on there, which is the reason I asked the question of Bruce in the first place. As he knows, I probably will around the CapEx, which is actually how are we, you know, it is important that in the LTP we are honest with our communities about what actually we are capable of doing, quite frankly. And if they want greater capability, they pay for it. Correct. Okay. Is there anything else people would like to raise off about I have one other point that I just want to ask on. One of the risks down here is everybody who effectively manage emergency / business continuity. I've always said in various committees, well, actually, we've done that. We've met the pandemic overnight. No reason to believe we haven't here at Thames-Coromandel. Do we have a version 3, 4, 5 coming at us? That's the critical question. We do have the other things on top of us. What are we doing internally to let people have leave? I'm probably looking at yourself and Bruce and Rob and everybody else. And actually, what do you think of the general state of the staff well-being is at this stage?
It's a good point, really, because I've been talking with our people capability manager, and to get a list of people with high leave balances, and majority of them are sort of, sort of like in the management area, and so what we're asking for is to look at this over the next few months and then come up with some leave and some way of making sure that people can take their leave. It's a tricky one, but generally I think the staff morale is generally pretty good. We do engagement surveys, and we have these check-in ones every 6 weeks, Sunday.
The pulse checks.
Pulse surveys, and so that's been the information that we're getting out of that has been really helpful to us as a leadership team on how staff are and what's happening in the area. So I think overall, I think the staff is still doing okay.
Yeah, through the chair, I agree with that. I think overall staff are responding quite well. We've got a good level of resilience. Obviously, staff they like to know where things are going, and they don't want to be jumping and changing with things, which can be quite unsettling. So, but yeah, as much as we can provide that stability, and as much as they can, themselves draw their own reserves, I think overall, I think staff are doing pretty well. We've been happy with the way staff have responded. I think overall it's probably as good as we can hope for.
John, do we have a number where it's a certain amount of accumulated leave that will trigger and start to talk with the employer about the amount of leave they've got own and manage it? We do have that. How many days do we accumulate up to 160?
So generally what we've done in the past is a year's worth of annual leave.
Yeah.
So once they're getting over a year's worth of annual leave, at the end of the year, it's like, well, you haven't taken any leave this year.
Yeah.
Or that situation, then we start getting them, so they've got 4 weeks, 160 hours, you know, as soon as they start going over there, we start talking to them.
Yeah.
You know, I know, like in my team, in the last 12 months, I've you know, put my hand up and say I'll play a little bit to kind of have their focus, because in the past I've had a real focus on that and managing the balances down with my team. In the last 12 months, I've been busy and I have needed to do that, so some of my team crept up. But that's exactly what I was talking about, is now a new people capability manager, bringing that level of reporting back up front to the managers to make sure they're having those discussions and managing the lead down.
Right, because not people are not taking the lead and then these sorts of other problems.
Huge problems and it's
It's not nice to manage.
I think we need it to be, I think we should be, you know, I mean, without jumping on to Rob's job, we as a committee need to keep an eye on this, particularly in the coming period, because we've had COVID, we've had the annual plan, we've got the annual report on us, but if we come to you, we're now got the LPP, it's just totally, it's a tough year. They're like, for a council to track through, so, we should just be aware of that. I'd like to move that we, receive, the risk report. I don't think adding anything to that at this stage. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Murray. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carry. Thanks a lot. Brandon, thank you for that. Very useful discussion. I think actually, I should have said before we move that it actually means that the risks are right. They give a price for the discussion on it. So thank you for that at this stage. Can we move on to the summary of remission and postponement of rates? Ah, yeah, the full show almost there on there. Okay, far away.
Yes, so this is, within our rates remission policies, our rates and our rates postponement policies, there is a clause in there that says that we must bring a summary of all remissions and postponements back to the council or committee of council each year, just so that we can see what we've remitted on. So that's what this report is for. You can go to it. So what I've done for this is I've also given a comparative for the rates remission policy, which is the one that's got several different policies underneath it, one of which is the miscellaneous purposes policy, which you'll be familiar with because anything under that comes to this committee for approval.
We've got a few today.
Yeah, and so what I've also done is I've put a comparison to last year on the numbers and the amount of remissions as well, so you can sort of get a feel of how that's tracking with those. And then with the postponements of rates, we've had a little bit more of an uptake in postponements this year. It's been quiet for a long time. Like we've pretty much had, I think that 13 and Ray had one the year before for a number of years, but just in this last financial year we've had another 5. That's so people are starting to take it, mostly in the area of people in that 65 plus age group. They're not using, it's not, I don't believe we've had any under the hardship one, it's more over the 65 plus where people want to postpone the rates on that one. So, and for penalties, penalties I've broken it down so that you can just get a little bit more feel rather than just saying that we remitted 493,000. So, because when we do talk to people about their overdue rates and things, you know, there's penalties obviously from other years, and then we get penalties on penalties on penalties, and often, you know, you can look at somebody when you're talking to them about their rates debt, and you'll see that there's quite a big chunk of that as penalties, and if they are committed to set up a direct debit and pay the balance, and then we will remit penalties back, so that, you know, if they're going to pay going forward. So we've made a real effort in the last. Yeah.
Use some money to still try, yeah.
But I guess for us, we'd rather get the rates that we write, and if it means remitting a bit of penalties, I think that where we can, I think that it's a good outcome for everybody. So has anybody got any questions on this report?
So on the table 1, can you just explain this is rating units containing 2 separately habitable units 100% and rating units containing 2, oh no, sorry, yeah, just that first one, because that's got 245,000 to 331.
Oh, right, okay. So that's under our, we call it our second dwelling permission.
Yeah.
Which is in our which is explained in our rates remission policy. So that's about, if people have got two dwellings on their property, and one of them is just for use by family and friends, like they're not renting
So
it
like
out.
a granny flat.
Yes,
one
they're
would
not renting it out or anything, well then they can get remission on some of the charges on their property.
be- Right, as opposed to being a commercial,
As
or
opposed to,
so being rented.
well, yes, as opposed to it being a separately, separately usable, unit. Yeah, they could be getting rent and not, or they could be leasing it out, and that could be, like you say, a B&B or something like that.
Right,
So we have two policies in our rates remission policies around those types of situations.
yeah. So has that drawn up to that amount sort of because it's that particular policy's been promoted and
No.
people are being encouraged to, or is it just?
The policy's always been there. I think we've just seen a lot more uptake in that over the last 12 months in the past. And the rates team do a lot of work in that area as well, and of looking for, properties like that should be maybe getting rates and aren't. So we've got quite a bit of work going on in the background to make sure that these are right. The people, when they apply for these policies, they have to, for these remissions, have to complete a statutory declaration to say that they aren't using it for commercial gains. So,
Right,
yeah.
and I guess that the fact that they could get a remission might encourage them to do things by the book and make sure that it's compliant.
Okay, any other questions for Donna at this stage? This is a very useful report. Here I say it from a straight operation. Already mentioned a number of times today the importance of rates to our collection. We've shown $1 million, which might otherwise be rated and doesn't come in the door. Which means we think we have to cover that through the other rate. The funds arguably do eventually come back in. So that's just deferred income in a sense. And the penalties is in some sense a pragmatic response, although I notice most of it's on statute barred rates, so I presume it's at Maori freehold properties. So there's already a natural product for that. So there's only 250,000 roughly is what we are doing in a pragmatic way to get the real number off our ratepayers. So this is an expense, it's a holding cost for us. We don't have $1 million in the bank. We have to cover it some other way. Whether it's through our debt, whether it's through lower reserves, whatever. It's a real cost to us. So I just want to reflect on that, but it's actually just helpful in the sense of the committee to understand that. I do note that I think in terms of getting your LTP, you are about to deal with all the remission policies. So perhaps I could recommend that you have this paper on the desk at the same time if you think about those remission policies.
We have a workshop on them next Monday.
That's right. So that's not suggesting, by the way, that you get tougher, but just to reflect the remission ultimately is a rate that otherwise you would be able to have collected. And you did there for good reasons. There's nothing wrong with the remission per se, but it does reflect the cost of council.
I think I'm sure that we get around about $1 million, don't we, in penalties
Anyway, yeah.
anyway, so
yeah,
that's, and it's offset by what we're doing.
Yes.
We don't remember.
Yeah. Oh, no, I realise you don't remember all penalties, but I think what I'm trying to reflect here is that as you've related, often we are remitting for the pragmatism of partly helping a ratepayer, at least put their hand up and see if I need to pay $9 million, but we're saying we'll pay off the principal. Okay, good.
Yeah, and we have got, with the workshop that we've got next week, here's some suggested changes, proposed changes to some of these policies as well. To have a look at to discuss and really see what council's appetite is to make some changes in this area.
Cracker, okay. So if I can look at the motion, please. Again, it's a simple one of just receiving the report, which is great. I'd like to move that. Could I have a second, please? Yes. Thank you, John. Is there any debate on the motion? All those in favour, please say aye. Sure, thank you very much, Brian, very helpful. Right, a couple of DC reviews, having talked about emissions. Let's see how we go, and you obviously aren't on it.
No, I'm Hayden.
Clear that up.
Yeah.
Right, well, okay, I wasn't speaking to you, David, but like, it's actually lovely to see the face of we've spoken on the phone before, so it's nice to meet you, buddy. When you hand this to me?
Yes, so
I would just use to explain both, and then we'll look to pass a couple of motions to
cool. So 2.8 is the Coromandel Independent Living Trust. They are looking for basically for their DCs to be waived. And it's in line with a policy that would then be a non-for-profit entity to do that. So, yeah.
So if I can just check before we just actually talk about other one, Hayden, there's nothing special about the consideration of staff that are given for this. Essentially, the paper is saying they fit our criteria.
Yeah.
Correct. Are there any questions you would like to ask, David? Yes, right. We'll start with Sally and then we'll go.
Which makes me interested for Monday when we look at this review. Like it's 8,000, they're doing a huge project. They've got people renting, will rent like the district on board and Department of Corrections and things that should be paying their way. And so I'm really conflicted on this because I can see the value they do, and also within the setup of their whole project, this was an expense, and I see ways that they could get it back. That's what I'm wanting to, just because you're a non-profit doesn't mean that you're not a business and you invest your returns in a different way, perhaps. But so that's where I'm at with this, in that, you know, obviously committed to the project, but I'm not convinced that we have to support it by $8,000. That's my struggle right now.
Well, going to be asked to make a decision on that one today, Sally. So there we go. Tony, your point.
First thing was a charity saying that this was waived, that cost is absorbed at a district level.
Yes.
Yes. So it's really careful from where Sally is, and it's probably a question more from Murray, who also builds this type of something, not-for-profit charitable status. Do you pay, like if you take the work you do, so you pay, you've got a retirement village, all the money goes back to that, there's no profit. They just pay the dividend, no dividends. Do you pay DCs?
Well, I'm conflicted, and I'm conflicted on this one.
I should have asked, sorry.
No, I'll just say my position. I'm conflicted on this one because I did some units in Whitianga, which are for a registered charitable company. The shares are held by a registered charitable trust, which I believe is along the lines of the policy. This was a few years back. We got charged development contributions. We have not had any to do with rating or development contributions, any contributions from council at all, even though it is a registered charitable company and it's a registered charitable trust. No. So I look at this and I'm conflicted, and I say, if we're going to do one thing, we're going to do it for everything. And in the past, we've paid it. The second thing is I look at something like this, and I think it aligns us where we are with our lease policy, where we have, and I still go back to the Wellington Sports Club that sits there, and they don't pay any development contributions on council land. This one, we're asking for it. You know, this opens up to me a can of worms at the moment, and I'm conflicted on it. Right at the moment, I can't support it.
So just if I just finish that question. So for me, I sort of get the same case. So the opportunity here to recover this money, and this would seem more to me that someone sees the possibility of looking at our policy and actually get a check and offset on this basis. So I'm the same thing, I agree with Scotty too.
John?
First of all, I totally understand what Sally was saying, because when I first read this is my ward too. I thought, okay, yeah, that doesn't quite fit, but if you go back to the bottom paragraph on the report, which says that it's the criteria that we have determined in order to consider it. And then, if you actually go to bullet point 1, 2, 3, on the second page, page 90, it says that any funds generated will be returned to the community. Okay, so still there's no profit there for anybody going back to the Coromandel community. No doubt about it. So A, it meets the criteria. B, any money raised is going back to the community. So having looked at that, I actually have no problem at all with saying that it should be approved. And I'm actually going to move the recommendation to see how it flies.
Thank you, John. So, are there any other comments people would like to make around this? Yes, Mark.
So, as John's pointed out, if it meets the criteria, do we then have to come up with some big important overriding reason as to why we couldn't support it? I mean, are we saying if we don't support it, that in fact that policy is wrong and we're not?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, we might have missed the boat for this one, and if it's a really clear policy, why does it even have to come here? And so, so here in the policy, does it say that there is political oversight of this, and it isn't just a straight procedural thing? And B, if it does meet it, so therefore we have an obligation to approve it, well then that'll be a really interesting discussion on Monday, because having run a non-profit organisation, social service agency for a long time, you have to be able to run it as a business and pay your way, even though you're providing the best services you can. And I just think we have to get away from, a racket.
Hey, I'm not asking you for a political view, but are you able to help us here from a factual perspective? Firstly, the paper is clear that CIPL meet the criteria for emission.
Yeah, it's 3.9.5.
Which is John's point.
Yeah, for consideration.
But secondly, the current policy settings are that even though it meets the criteria, essentially that needs confirmation or sanction from the Audit and Risk Committee before you can actually grant the criteria. So factually, our rules are set up that we are doing exactly what we have to do, so number one. So I don't think we can back up from the responsibility of making a decision. Okay. You've got a chance to sort of see how things all come together, don't they? One day in a meeting, but we realise Monday's going to become more critical potentially as far as this discussion is concerned.
Just through the chair, just to be clear, this is a development contributions policy. The Monday one is.
Sorry.
This will be a different discussion.
Yeah, okay, fair point. Very good. Okay, so, sorry, Mark.
So just to be aware, the decision we make on this will also impact on item 2.9.
That's right.
And I think the council has got to be very aware of they're actually going to make, they pass this one, they pass the other one.
Well, hang on, I disagree with that actually.
I think actually, I see that we do both together, but I think actually.
I see that
It's something here.
Yeah, no, I think it's not quite the same. It's a charitable trust, the other one's a private individual. So
No, the other one is the Scouts.
Oh, Scouts, sorry, yeah,
The other one's the Scouts.
I've got one too far.
So what you're doing is setting a precedent.
Well, no, we're applying policy.
Well, we should define policy not on the hoof, but we should define policy properly.
So, no, question for you, come individually to two different meetings, would you approve one and not the other? Like, how do you feel about Scouts?
Well, I'm saying if you approve one, you've got to approve both. If you don't approve, you don't approve either.
Yeah, would you approve the Scouts?
Sorry?
Are you in favour of the Scouts?
I don't believe the policy is there, and I already said I can't support it.
Thank you. I just,
And I wouldn't agree with Scouts for the same reason.
cool, thank you.
And I'll make that point very clear. And I also believe, if I can, Mr. Chairman, if I can just carry on, I believe the Scouts is a local issue.
Yeah.
So I believe we take it back to our local community, and if our local community wants to do it, then the local community do it through their local funding, which I believe Coromandel should be doing it exactly the same, rather than the district level, which we've opened contribution to. The Coromandel is locally funded, they have locally funds, that's prerogative, and I don't give it something. That's what I say. Okay.
Well, and mine was about the policy, so if that was the case, and it qualifies, why do we even give a bill? And so if I go to the Scouts, so we had a community board meeting last week, and so the Scouts came to us for a community grant. So we didn't distribute roughly 10,000 of the 30,000 available, knowing that this was coming up. And so if they miss out on this, then at a community level, because it isn't a community, we would be going to say, come back and we'll give that our retained earnings, because the $10,000 has gone to retained earnings because we can distribute it. And that was the backstop. So for us, if it misses out here, we would be wanting them to go back to the community board to improve that. So
I think for this year, that we are mixing too many things together. How it is funded is not the issue. The issue here, I would have thought, is we have a development contribution policy, which we have somewhere back in the track, probably was the last long-term plan adopted. Okay, which does have conditions, and this is a normal way, it's no different to your rates remission in that sense, that you assess the liability so that you know what you are forking. Okay, so the policy has been set. So we've got a challenge here, which is actually what are the grounds for us not to apply the policy?
No.
Correct. That's just what we want.
We haven't got it. No.
Through the chair, I think that the section 3.9.5 is the end where it says the justification for doing so it needs to result in a clear benefit created towards social, economic, environmental, or cultural well-being within the district community. So I think that is what would be what would be debated, is whether there's these two organisations fit their criteria.
And indeed, in fairness to Murray's argument, the policy says council made. It doesn't say the law, it says made.
Yeah.
So if we made this a long time ago, it uses judgment. That's not a reason to go come to this case. Yeah, right.
While I hear that Sally's argument, and definitely hear yours as well, I think I've heard a lot sitting around this table, a reluctance for council to have a role in social well-being of communities. And so I see this as using a policy that is there, it's in front of us on the page. It says we need a justifiable reason for not doing this, I guess. And it's just a very small contribution to two things that are actually going to make a really big difference to the well-being of our communities, which is why I support them and would waive the fees.
Thank you, Robin. Right, I think is there any more discussion on this, or we have a motion which I haven't got a second for yet?
I would second that.
You'll second that. So we do have a motion. So John's moved it, and Robin, you've seconded. Do we have any debate left us? Right, yeah. So I think it's probably only fair that I put the motion. Okay, all those in favour? I might just suggest for the benefit of this, again, can we just raise our hands? All those in favour, please raise their hands. Okay, so those against will be. Pardon?
I'm in favour of it.
Oh, you're in favour? Oh, sorry.
I'm going in favour because it's,
Okay,
we've determined this.
so that means the only hand I haven't seen properly is Tony and Shaw's.
No,
That's the policy.
That's the policy.
Well, we've got, okay, so let me just clarify, and we'll do it one more time, so I don't know whether you saw the hand or not. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Thank you, appreciate that. The motion is carried. Thank you for that. Thank you for the robust debate we need to be able to express, and for the professional way you've done it so far. Let's see if we can bring it into 90 Mowai Road, pretty accurate as well, so this is scouts.
I'll move the motion.
You'll move the
I'll
motion?
second it.
You'll second that? Is there any debate? Hayden, before I shoot through this, is there anything you need to add to this? You can see that we're probably.
No, it's just similar.
Okay, right, thank you. Okay, so Murray moved this? Sorry, who moved this?
Murray.
And who seconded?
I'll go there.
John, you did, John, thank you. Okay, all those in favour, in this case, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Well, I don't deny the issue about funding where it comes from, Murray, but that's an internal discussion. It's got nothing to do with.
I think it's
Balance sheet's still a balance sheet, so.
I think it's-
No, it hasn't been, but that's where we saw
The utility question.
Yeah, so rather than take the district, we saw that it would be locally funded.
Yeah, okay.
But that's the council.
And I think it's just important that we get invited along to the opening.
Hey, guys, for $10,000 in your account, that's
Yeah, okay. Can we just move then on to the next item, please, which is item 2.10, which is do members, I'll just go around the room, wish to contribute anything at this stage as we go. I'm going to start on the right-hand side with you, John, and go around. Okay, thank you, John. None?
No, I've got nothing on.
We've done, Robin?
No, no.
Tony, you sent to raise this.
Yeah, well, I do, and it's risk and reputational risk. And the burning issues where I live is water and coastal erosion. And big ticket items. And I think that we need to have significantly better comms on that categorically state our position on these matters. There is no shortage of water in Woodiang, potable water. After 7 months of drought, there was a shortage that didn't let us water our lawns, our gardens, wash our cars, our boats, and anything else we own. But that is part of the way we manage the supply. So we are going to be looking at metering, we are going to be looking at other measures to conserve water. But we need to state that's our position, which is something we haven't done. And so the public at home, social media remains alive and well, critical of people by name, critical of communities, critical of this organisation, because we don't know what we're doing. That isn't true, but that is the perception. And likewise with coastal erosion. Now, I know the shoreline management process is in train, but we do have a problem at home at the moment because land is being eaten away by the minute. And there is a community organisation, which is a boating club or a sailing club, to be more correct. It probably should never have gone there in the first place, but it did. And it got there on the proviso that that building could be transported in the event of erosion or some other thing that's going to take land of it. That thing there is growing, it forms a significant part of what we do in our community. It's a very, very youth focused, and more youth focused than older focused. And the problem primarily is the result of a homeowner's law that was put in the first place, non-consent, consented restrictedly, where the consent is now going to be reviewed and there's all sorts of problems with it. And it's the end effect from that law. With focus, I sit at home, I see every day. I just watch the waves and where they go, and that's what's scaring us out. If our position is simply to use the reserve as the buffer between that and our infrastructure, and we don't mind losing half an acre reserve and a building, I'm comfortable with that. Just go and tell people that's our position. rather than what we've done for the last 10 years, is either hope the problem's going to go away or nothing. Or tell the people that the cost for every metre of rock you put in is whatever, and tell them how many metres it is and what the cost is and what the rating impact is, and then go and make your decision. But we are loath as an organisation of telling people what our position is, and one that we, the elected people, can stand behind and the staff can confidently defend. So there's a criticism I have, and I know shared within this organisation, that we are not good at that. We are just simply trying to keep as many people happy as we can and delay the inevitable. So all I say is, whilst I do not really want to see the boating club, the yacht club in this case, go, picking it up and shifting it is not a practical solution. But I tell you, the water now, when we were there a fortnight ago, was 3-4 metres away from the deck on this building. Today, it is another metre closer to the building. And if we have another easterly condition, say it lasts for 3 days, the deck will be in the water. And then, not only do they think that people like us haven't done their job, which is something I can't even fix, but I'll willingly stand up and wear it. The organisation is seen to have no plan, no nothing, no compassion, nothing. And we don't have a solution. Well, we do. So for the life of me, it just, sitting behind while the shoreline management program is taking place, will be another 2 years before we can get ready. In 2 years' time, that building will be gone. So, everyone in this room, you're all in it. Because no one wants to get this thing ripped up and fix it. So either front up and tell people where we stand, and our position is it's going, because we've got no money to fix it, so tough, or go and think about how you're going to get it and how you're going to fund fixing it. And our problem, and so the other problem for us is it costs us. This is an environmental plan and the dual consent. So our council to go and look, so we're all saying just go and lodge a consent to put a rock wall in and 2 ruins. That will probably cost us the 50 into a couple $100,000 to go and have another 50 reports and come up with something. It takes 5 years to do it as well. And having done all that, and if we're not buying, we're going to go to the regional council and we're going to pay again to basically endorse what we've done and tell us that we can't have a solid structure, or we can't have a drawing, or we can't have something. So for me, like, we are not doing ourselves justice and the organisations, because we simply put the inevitable off and we give people false hope. And for me, I am desperately frustrated about it. And we've got a man here that's really involved in our media. But I think it's a policy that has to come out of this place, that we start actually not spinning stuff, we go out and tell the facts, warts and all, and then get the community. Because I tell you, the water, I don't know how many you've seen, I did the exercise of water on the back of a fan pack. 90 days supply over 9 sites costs 2.2 billion. Amortise it over 50 years, take interest in the depreciation, and the cost per ratepayer is $6,300 per annum. That's the medicine. Is that what you want? Oh, you don't want that. Well, you want it. What are you going to give up? That's the sort of information that we're going to be on the front foot and telling people. And I really, well, no secret, but I'm looking forward to retirement, because I don't think it's, I'm not doing myself justice, and I'm not doing my community justice, and I'm not doing this council justice, because we're playing with something that we've made no progress in 10 years. So for a member's report, I hope that's all recorded, and I hope there's somewhere everyone reads it, because I'm really, really, as you can tell, very frustrated. That's my report.
Thanks, Tony. We want to raise that partly at the committee in terms of risk. I seem to have lost Donnie or colleagues here. It's it's not that I think, I want to say Tony's another side, but can we leave it then, Donnie? Unfortunately, you've been the only recipient of it here, but if you could feed that back to the management, I think that would be useful. Tony's not the first time I've heard the story, one way or the other. I'm not accusing you of being repetitive, but probably it's been 10 years that people not trying to get it. Murray.
Well, I probably am going to be repetitive, Mr. Chairman, because we are taking somewhat of a battery up here in our community. Let's take the water thing, and I'll go on the radio about water. You know, when you start saying to people on the radio that we have 550 kilometres of water mains that stretch from Thames to Wellington, they start to realise what we've got. When you start to say, according to NERI reports, we had 94 days without any rain, they start to realise how long the drought is. When you start to talk about we use 8,000 cubic metres or 8 million litres of water a day, at peak time in Whitianga, they start to realise the quantum. When you start talking about 1 day's supply to store, depending on the type of tankers, between $1 million and $1.3 million per day, they start to realise the magnitude of the problem. When you start to talk about 29,000 ratepayers and 4,000 ratepayers in Whitianga, they start to realise the problem. But our comms did not put one of those facts out there. We start to talk about rubbish, and we talk about rubbish going off the peninsula. 300 days a year, there's 2 truck and trailer loads go to landfill. So we've got to talk to our comms about what we can do to stop that going off the landfill, what the stuff does, how we can change our habits. And we get battered on the coastal erosion, big face, the bloody council, is broke. Now this council's not broke, but we just talked this morning, we're going to be taking, we talk about social spending, Robin, but I tell you, I think every drop of social spending that this council is spending should be squeezed off, cut off, blank. Because I believe our infrastructure problems are so severe across the district, and we as councillors are not facing it, we're still not facing it. And we have a risk, Mr. Chairman, a huge risk on a whole of infrastructure problems, and we as councillors are not facing it. I believe it. But I have been saying for a long time, the model's unfair.
There's certainly challenges with the community model. Sorry, that's not for me. I've got no solution, Murray.
We get it back, and I suppose we're getting a bit touchy about it.
Yeah. Well, I think it, without being sort of a placebo or whatever, I think it does reflect again. Sorry, Don, I'm talking to you as management. It does again reflect the importance around what we do in the communication. I think Murray, you said previously, it doesn't start with the open fair, it starts now. But certainly we have a prime issue or prime opportunity, going forward with the long-term plan. And you've raised the challenge: how do we make the challenges that we face tangible in the mind of the average ratepayer? You know, your idea of we manage a pipeline that runs from here to Wellington type situation becomes really important. I think the other thing which I'd better pick up from what you said, Tony, is let's not just be people to try and say things that we think the community want to hear. We actually have to be honest with them. So there is at the very least a real comms issue here, which we are attaching back to our credibility and reputation. And there's also, go back to Tony's point, there is a matter there in relationship to a particular issue. I suppose that leaves it to me. I don't want to take a lot of time. What I want to really say is I think the critical issues that I would see from my external distance, we have largely discussed already this morning in terms of our long-term plan and our risk schedule. Can I say that actually when I read the long-term plan stuff, I was encouraged about the level of organisation within the council. The risk of not telling you, the risk of telling you what my itinerary has been, this week I have already been working with 2 councils that will be nowhere near this level of organisation for good, understandable reasons, but nevertheless, nowhere near it. So, we should be encouraged that we've got the system in place. I'm not going to, I treat your criticism as valid here, Tony and Murray, but equally, the system is only going to be good if it does have what is called in other circles the right way. Okay, so there's a challenge for us in terms of comms. So look, my point literally being that actually management have got us into a good place to enable this. It's for us to work with management to be able to have the sort of conversation that we as councillors, as elected members, want to have. Great. Look, I think probably is important. I don't know whether I mentioned, but I think we should probably just move a short motion that we receive the report. I'll move that from the chair. Can I have a second, please? Thank you, Mary. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? Carried. Thank you very much.
I'll move that we.
Thank you, Sally. And who will second that? Thank you, Tony. Move to exclude the public. All those in favour for the reasons that stated in the motion. For all those